Welcome to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I'm your host, Darrell Scott, and together we will dive into the lives and careers of the jazz legends who have left a rhythmic imprint on the world. Be prepared to reminisce on the highs and the lows of their musical journey and the trials that sculpted their timeless musical gems. We'll preserve the legacy of these extraordinary maestros and find inspiration in the melodies of their lives. Subscribe now and never miss a beat. Now, let's get to the show. Now, you may remember that song. That is Freddie the Freeloader, originally done by Miles Davis. But the artist who performed it is Eric Gould. Eric is a good friend of mine. We've known each other since a long time ago. That's all I'm going to say. So, Eric, welcome to the show. Glad you're here.
Nice to be here.
I really appreciate this. But the one thing I want to talk about, and I get this confused, and I think I had this conversation with Joe Hunter, who was on the show before. Are you a keyboardist or are you a pianist? Which is the proper term for what you do?
For what I do at this point, I'm a pianist. I mean, I spent time as a keyboardist, but I very rarely play keyboards anymore. I have focused my energies almost exclusively on acoustic piano for the last long period of time, probably 20 years. So for the last 20 years, in fact, it was 19 years ago on December 18th or so that I played my last gig on keyboards. So
19 years ago, so that would make you about 27 at the time. Okay,
that's exactly right.
We'll leave that alone. So why did you decide at an early age to play piano?
Well, the piano wasn't the first instrument I played, but when we met, I was playing woodwind instruments, and I was fooling around with the piano, is what I would characterize it as. And the piano was a writing tool for me, and I really just fell in love with it. I was playing clarinet, some saxophone, and some flute, and the piano was something I would write on because I was writing music from age 11 or 12 or so. So that was what I used to write at, and then I just fell in love with the instrument.
That's funny. I think of you as us running through the hallways of Shaker Heights High School, and you were writing music at this time. So the one thing I think not a lot of people know that in our conversations, you also played with another former guest of the show, Herb Wilborn.
Yeah.
How did you and Herb get together, and was there pressure from us outside sources because you're two playing music and we thought maybe you should have played football or you should have played basketball?
Well, Herb was actually a dream team football player.
Yeah.
And we met initially in probably around the same period. We were around 14. So we all met around in the same period. Herb was dating a young lady who was part of my neighborhood sphere. And we ended up spending time around each other, discovered that we had mutual interests. Herb and I started playing together at around age 14. We would get together at my house and play tunes. And so we were very much involved with each other at an early age. And and Herb went on. I went on to go down to school at University of Cincinnati. Herb went on to study at CIM here in Cleveland, and we reconnected when I came back to town in the early '80s in 1981.
Was it difficult? I mean, we're teenagers, and you're playing gigs in front of who knows how many people. Were you nervous? Were you scared? Did you grow into the ability to, I'm just going to go out and play?
Well, interestingly enough, when you're playing with a group, it's a different dynamic than when you're playing solo piano, because there's other people on the stage and often as a pianist, those other people are the focal point. So it may be a vocalist, it may be a horn player, it may someone else, and Herb, standing in front of the stage, and therefore the audience's attention is focused on them. So I became very much comfortable with performing pretty early. I mean, I had my first performances in junior high school. I even before that, I mean, I was playing in the school band. There was other people on stage with me, so I was able to get on stage and be comfortable, and that really helped a lot.
So we get to a point where all of a sudden you decide to do this music thing full time. How did you make that decision?
Well, music has always been for me a spiritual journey. It hasn't been a traditional professional journey. It's the thing that I felt that I could bring the most of myself to, and challenge myself in ways that other things just didn't challenge me as much. And I really enjoyed the fact that I could bring something to the world and share it with people, and that it didn't have to be something that could be turned into a negative. I mean, for instance, I had a substantial interest in science, but I think anything I would have accomplished in science would have been turned into a negative thing,
Mm-hmm.
So art is something that you can bring to the world, that focuses on the human experience, that allows you to express yourself in very intimate ways, through a medium that is abstract and therefore open to interpretation on many levels, and I like that. So that's really what drew me into the journey to be an artist, and music was one of the art forms that I was engaged in, or had a substantial interest in. I had an interest in scoring films, although that never really came to be. I had an interest in photography, and still like to snap photos of my experiences and my journeys. And music is just one of those things. It just happens to be the most prominent one in my life.
Now, your career has spanned many different aspects, and it would take this show and probably 8 more like it to go through all of them. So we're going to highlight some. So you're a musician. At some point, you're playing gigs, you're out in the public eye, but then all of a sudden you want to get into you go to the Cleveland Institute, the music settlement, and start teaching there, which leads to you getting to Berkeley, which we will talk about shortly. How does this process tell me your mind process of graduating to, and we won't get into the level that you're at right now, but the beginning of the career of Eric Gould.
Well, interestingly enough, when I was in my earliest years, um, I was fortunate to know and be around a very energetic and um, influential woman by the name of Mildred Madison. She was involved in many of the inner workings of Cleveland's political and social scene. And she, when I was 21, she hired me to be part of a program called CETA and the Arts. CETA was the Cooperative Education and Training Act, and she was the person who pulled the purse strings on those funds. She was the executive director, so to speak. And CETA had a lot of programs. They had musical program. They had a band where people actually got paid to play music and learn how to play jazz. Some of my contemporaries and friends were participants in that band. There was some of the murals that you see around the city were put up by that program during that summer. There was one at Garden Valley that I think they painted over now, but there was one, there were murals all over the city. There was one downtown. There was a couple on Kinsman, some on the south side, some on the west side. And those were part of that program as well. There was journalism programs. There were all kinds of things. And at the same time, there was a program running through the Cleveland schools called the Supplementary Center. And those two things became entwined in certain ways as well. And so that became my first arts administration job. Mm-hmm. And I was 21. And because of that, I always had a foot in that arena. So fast forward later on, between that period and later on, I dabbled in a couple of programs, but I was primarily focused on playing the piano. And along came an opportunity at the Music Settlement in arts administration. It wasn't teaching there. I was doing outreach programming for the Music Settlement when I started there. And that I did 5 years in various capacities at the Music Settlement as an arts administrator. So I produced the festival called the Live with the Arts Festival that became, in many ways, the Parade the Circle after a few years of that. There were programs at community centers around the city, and it was a way for me to serve my community and be helpful in my community, which has always been an important component of my life. It was a way for me to serve my community and help people who otherwise might not have the joy of experiencing music. So I did that for 5 years. And at the end of that 5-year period, I was trying to move to New York. My ambition was to move to New York, and I wanted to go to grad school there and continue on with my career in music and composition and piano playing. But my parents fell ill. I stayed here in Cleveland. So I ended up taking other opportunities like that here in Cleveland. So I ran a music program called the Excellence in Music Initiative. Actually, it was the Excellence in Music program when I took it over. And it needed, the funders had decreed that it needed to make some changes. And I ended up changing it into a community initiative that encompassed a lot of things and gave free instruction to Cleveland school students. There were a number of people who came through that program, and it grew into the Tri-C preparatory program. But there were a number of people who came through that program. I think you're familiar with Riley Richards. He was in when I took it over, it was called the Excellence in Music Program, and Sean Jones had left the year before I took it over. So it was already doing good things before I got there, and then we did a lot of things afterward, and I ran that program for 5 years. And was still trying to move to New York, but I was recording and doing other things at the same time. And then there was a period between 2000 and 2000, I don't know, 4 or 5, where I was focused on a lot of composition, a lot of things like that. But then fast forward to 2004, because I have to jump back to 1986 now, because back in 1986 I encountered and developed a relationship with Billy Taylor, Dr. Billy Taylor.
Billy Taylor, right?
Yeah, at his urging, one of the things that he said to me that was so impactful is that the jazz is moving into the educational arena, and that I needed to be involved with that. So he saw something in me that I wasn't focusing on at the time, and so I began trying in the later 1990s, after I found myself in Cleveland, in spite of wanting and needing to be in New York. I found myself focusing on the educational arena. So I then went on to teach at some colleges, and then a second stint at the music settlement happened. I had a number of job offers at the time. One was in Dayton. I didn't want to move to Dayton, and I was a finalist for a position at UMass Amherst that Yusef Lateef had retired. And Jimmy Heath recommended me for that, and it didn't end up working out that way. But and the third option was the music settlement, running the music settlement. So I was the director of the Department of Music at the music settlement from 2008 to 2012.
Eric, I want people to have a chance. I want people to have a chance to listen to some of the music that you have played. So right now we're going to take a few seconds and we're going to play Dolphin Dance, which you covered the Herbie Hancock tune. So let's listen to that right now. You know what? You can play. You can play. That was really nice. And there's a certain groove there. You have mentioned throughout your career, you have come in contact and collaborated with some legendary musicians: Ron Carter, Jimmy Heath, James Newton, Cindy Blackman, our very own Vanessa Rubin. How do you get that notoriety? What do you think makes them call you?
Well, I didn't, first of all of them didn't call me.
Okay.
I called some of them. I called, and I think one of the things that happens is you're involved in a sphere as you are doing what you do, and the thing is that your reputation is built on the things that you do. So, for instance, I was able to engage Ron Carter because Jimmy Heath recommended me.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jimmy Heath was one of the first veteran musicians really to mentor me and to help me in my career. I was pretty late in my career at the time, but he was very helpful in making recommendations. I remember getting a call from him one day, and he said, "I just got off the phone with Bill Cosby." This was before all the Cosby drama. Mm-hmm. And he said, and I needed to make a recommendation, and I'm recommending you. And can you imagine getting that call? That was the level and the kind of help that he was willing to offer me. And so when I called Ron Carter, because I was hired to do a tribute to Oscar Pettiford, I said, "Hey, Jimmy Heath gave me your number and said I should call you," and he was all ears. He invited me into his home, and that's how our relationship started, and it continues to this day. So yeah,
we're doing all of this, and all of a sudden, you get this job at what I think is one of the most prestigious musical colleges in the world, Berklee College of Music. How did that come about? And then the constant pressure to perform, to have these students come to you and go, "I'm going to teach you, you're going to learn, and you're going to become a quality musician."
Well,
how did you get to Berklee?
How did I get there? That's the first question. So initially, I mentioned UMass Amherst. When I applied for that position, I took my trip to Amherst through Boston, which is the long way. I could have flown into Springfield, but I had a friend who had attended Berklee, who was the best man at my wedding, and who I've known since high school. We went. You might know the bass player Doug Rich. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Doug went to Berklee, and I went and visited him. And during that time, I got a sort of an overview of Berklee, a tour of Berklee. I had no idea that Berklee was what it was. I imagined Berklee as this little boutique college, because back in the day, that's what it was. It was that. And so I didn't realize how much it had grown and how much it had evolved. So when I got an eye opener there on that trip, now Berklee was on my radar. I had been solely focused on New York. When I took the job at the Music Settlement, one of the first things I did was set up a program where young jazz musicians in their teens, in thinking of the CETA experience back in my early 20s, could get paid to learn jazz as a summer job. And so with the help of young audiences, I started that program. And I was at a conference in California, in Los Angeles, and I was talking about this program at a panel meeting, at a breakout meeting, and a woman approached me afterward and said, "I want you to meet my boss. I work with Berklee College of Music," and we met. Our board members were there. We took them out to dinner. We found the makings of a partnership, and we formed a partnership between the Music Settlement and Berklee College of Music. And that partnership continued for the entire time. It continues to this day. So because of that partnership, we were able to send just dozens of students, of young students, and many African American students to college on full scholarships that otherwise might not have had the opportunity to go to college. So I was very happy with that, but at the same time, I was keeping an eye on other things at Berklee, and I got to know a lot of people at Berklee. So during that time, I also went to Berklee just in a totally unrelated move. A professor at Berklee who I had brought to the music settlement came, and he did a great job at the settlement, and I brought him back. And then he called me up one day and he said, I see you have a project with Ron Carter. I want to bring you in as a visiting artist to do your program with Ron Carter. So in 2010, a couple of years before I started working at Berklee, I went to Berklee as a visiting artist with Ron Carter to do a tribute to Oscar Pettiford. And we had a really good cast of players to play with the students. We had Terry Lynn Carrington on drums. We had Bill Pierce on saxophone. We had Ron Carter and Boots Mallison on bass. So Ron was playing piccolo bass, and I had written arrangements for an orchestra plus a 5-horn section, and we did that concert in 2010. So the first thing I did at Berklee was go there as a visiting artist. The next year, a professorship appeared. I'm now keeping my eye on Berklee and the job openings and that kind of thing. A professorship appeared, and I applied for it in jazz composition. And I went there and did an interview. Long story short, I didn't get the job. But they wanted me as chair. So he wrote that the existing chair of the department said, the committee really likes you. I'm retiring. You should apply for my job. And that's how it happened. I applied for his job, and got it. And I've been at Berklee ever since.
So what is your role now at Berklee?
Well, that's changed also since then. I don't stay put for long.
Obviously not.
No, but this, I don't anticipate a whole lot of changes here. I'm very happy with what I'm doing. But I started out as chair of jazz composition at Berklee, and after 2 contracts as chair, I moved to the professorship, and so I'm a full professor of piano in the piano department at Berklee.
Nice. Okay, before we continue, we have your interpretation of Joshua, which is a Miles Davis piece. Let's give a quick listen to that. So you compose, you play, you teach. Dude, what don't you do?
Sleep.
I was going to say, when do you rest? Because
yeah, I love what I do, and when you love what you do, it seems a lot less like work. And so the things that I'm doing now are things that I really love doing and don't want to stop doing. So there's a lot more composition, a lot more piano playing in my future and on the horizon for me. So that's what I enjoy most. I've done a lot of different things. Not all of them were things that I really enjoyed to this extent.
So think back to those days of I don't know if we didn't have the same teachers, so I'll use the gym teachers of Mr. Kastenstein, Mr. Morningstar, Mr. Vermillion, and those days of us walking through the hallways, being teenagers. Think of that, and then think of where you are now. Did you expect this? Was this on your horizon?
You know, I probably expected more than what I've been able to accomplish. I mean, life intervenes, um, and so I really thought, that there were a lot of things that I left on the table, but I'm not, I'm not living a life of regret or anything. I'm living the life that I lived, but the the journey for me has been a long and winding road for many, many reasons. It hasn't been a straight line by any stretch of the imagination. And I can't say that with regret either. It's because it's been a very, very interesting journey. And there's a saying, may you live in interesting times, or may you live an interesting life. So I've managed to enjoy the things that I do in spite of many of the things that I would have preferred to have been different, or even things that I may consider to be missed opportunities. But yeah, when
What's
I think
changed?
back on it.
What's changed in you, in your discipline, in your habits, um, that you think would benefit someone else, someone younger?
Well, the acquisition of discipline was the first thing that changed.
Okay.
you know, I wasn't always the most disciplined person. When I think back to the guy who was running around in junior high school, I had a lot of creative energy, but it wasn't all focused, and it was going in a lot of different directions, and there, because I went to a college prep program and there wasn't really any kind of a slot called jazz musician, jazz composer within that. There weren't that many outlets for me to be the person that I am today. There to work on being that. Had I been working on being a lawyer or a doctor, it would have been great. But in order for me to work on being me, there were a lot of twists and turns. When I was 15 years old, I was hanging out with 25-year-old jazz musicians and 30-year-old jazz musicians. I was hanging out in recording studios. I was meeting giants, people who were, I didn't know they were going to be giants. So all of them, they were, but some of them already were. And I was being shaped by the forces around me. My brother owned a recording studio. Um, I met a lot of really, really excellent people during that period, and it made a difference in how I perceived myself and how I perceived my future. So for young people, the thing that I would say is that discipline will take you to places that you can't go otherwise, because you have to be able to focus your energies, and as you do that, you start to get results that people can see and can believe in.
Eric, how can our listeners follow you, follow your music, follow what you're doing, follow your journey?
I wish it were as easy as I would like it to be. I haven't had much time to work on promoting myself. I've had a lot of other responsibilities in recent years, and now I'm getting to the point where I get to focus more on that. But there is ericgouldmusic.com. I do have a YouTube channel, uh, and you can always check out Eric Gould Music. Just Google that, all one word, and stuff will start to come up. Um, that's probably the best way. I have some other presences that are less developed in other social media, but that's the quickest way to do it.
As long as they're in development, that's a good thing. There's always that option to finish them and get them done. Eric, truly appreciate the time and learning things about you. For those of you that don't know yet, Eric and I have known each other an awfully long time, and he's always been successful, and he's been a guy that I can count on to do different things, and the music has been tremendous. You've heard a couple of samples during this show. So Eric, once again, thank you. Wish you all the best in your future. And let's just keep this going, and we'll talk again, I don't know, 6, 8, 9 a year, and see what's changed and what you've added.
Sounds good.
I appreciate it, man. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I'm Darrell Scott. Now, until the next time, peace. Thank you for tuning in to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I hope you enjoy these stories and soulful melodies that grew through the doors of time. If you want to stay connected with the latest updates and episodes, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Until next time, I'm Darrell Scott.